A Guide to Cromer and Its Neighbourhood, by a visitor.
Music is in thy billows, grandeur doth walk thy beach, sit on thy cliffs, wave in thy woods, and nature's smile or frown, as cast all thee, is beautiful.
Preface. A Guide to Cromer and its immediate neighbourhood having been long desired, the following is presented to the public. The author pretends to no originality, nor offers the present as perfect in its kind. It was undertaken simply because a deficiency was expressed, and a few hours of recreation gave the opportunity of attempting to supply it. All criticism, therefore, it is hoped, will be spared as to the execution of the design, and that the intention only will be regarded. Sincere thanks are returned to those individuals whose information has proved of such material assistance towards the completion of the work, with a full acknowledgement that, if any worth be attached to it, that worth is due to them. Cromer, August 3, 1841. A Guide to Cromer and Its Neighbourhood. There are few places in this kingdom which combine to a greater degree the advantages of a salubrious and invigorating air, a fine and open sea, or more pleasing scenery than Cromer. The lover of nature, the student, or the invalid may frequent its shores with equal benefit and with equal gratification. That it is not more known, or become a place of more general resort, is the result rather of circumstances than of any deficiency in itself. True, indeed, it has not the metropolitan luxuries of Brighton, or the elegances of some of our more southern favourites to recommend it, neither does it offer any resources of gaiety for the amusement of its visitors, but nevertheless, it will never want admirers, so long as an unvitiated taste, a desire of scientific knowledge, or a wish for the renovation of health shall exist. Cromer is situated on the most northeasterly point of the Norfolk coast, 9 miles N. W of North Walsham, 10 miles E. N. Ead of Holt, 11 miles N by Ead of Isham, 22 miles north of Norwich, and 130 N. E by N of London. It is built on lofty cliffs, not less than 60 feet high, nearest the town, and is sheltered on 3 sides by an amphitheatre of hills, partly covered with woods, and commanding a view of the wide waters of the German Ocean, nowhere to be excelled in extent or sublimity. Its population had increased between the years 1801 and 1836, from 676 souls to 1,232. By the last census it appeared that it was 1,229, but this apparent decline may be accounted for by the time of year in which it was taken, when no visitors were in the place, and the greatest part of the fishermen were absent at Yarmouth, engaged in the mackerel fishery, where their business frequently takes them. The parish now comprises only about 700 acres of land, mostly belonging to the Countess of Listowel, widow of the late George Thomas Wyndham, Esq of Cromer, and one of the daughters of the late Admiral Wyndham of Felbrigg, who is also the lady of the manor, and the owner of Cromer Hall. For some centuries the sea has continued to make considerable encroachments on this part of the coast. Cromer itself was formerly situated at some distance from it, and formed in the reign of the Conqueror, as appears from the Domesday Survey, a part of the lordship and parish of Shipton, a village of some importance, which, with its church, dedicated to St. Peter, was swallowed up by the sea about the time, as it is supposed, of Henry Roman IV. For a patent to exact certain dues for the erection of a pier at Shipton was granted in the 14th of Richard Roman II, and 2 years afterwards, Sir William Beauchamp alienated to a priory of Carthusians a piece of land in Shipton, adjoining the rectory. At very low tides, large masses of old wall are still to be seen nearly half a mile from the cliffs, which the fishermen call the Church Rock, from the supposition that they formed part of the old church at Shipton, but some have discredited the idea, on the ground that the constant action of the sea for so many ages must have destroyed all vestiges of the building. We have, however, seen a fragment of the wall which was lately obtained from the mast during a very low tide, and it is undoubtedly composed of the squared flints, such as are used in the present church of Cromer. The sea has continued to make rapid encroachments on the cliffs. Many large portions of land were washed away in 1611, previous to which the inhabitants had endeavoured, but fruitlessly, although they bestowed much labour and ingenuity in the attempt, to maintain a small harbour. In the winter of 1799, the lighthouse cliffs, which rise from the beach to the height of 220 feet, made several large slips, or sheets as they are called, one of which brought with it at least half an acre of ground, and extended a considerable way into the sea at low water mark. On January 15, 1825, a similar occurrence took place. An immense mass was detached from the cliff, which fell with tremendous force on the beach, extending in breadth above 500 yards from the cliffs, covering an area of about 12 acres, and containing, it was supposed, not less than 500,000 of cubic yards of earth. Nothing had been observed which could raise any suspicion of what was about to take place, but providentially no lives were lost, nor did any accident occur, although the coast guard had to pass in the night the very spot where it fell. A large and rapid stream, the cause in all probability of the catastrophe, immediately after the fall, issued from the bank, discharging itself down upon the beach with great violence. In the morning of August 19, 1832, the lighthouse hill again sustained a similar loss. This sheet was so considerable as to cause serious apprehension for the safety of the lighthouse itself, in consequence of which the master and elder brethren of the Trinity House, London, under whose superintendence all such matters are directed, determined on erecting a new one on the hill 280 yards further inland. The former one, which is partly dismantled, stands about 3/4 of a mile east of the town. Both houses are in the parish of Overstrand. The first was built of brick in 1719 by Edward Brown of Ipswich. The present tower is also constructed of brick and stuccoed. It is 52 feet in height, and about 300 above the level of the sea, surmounted with a lantern lighted by 30 lamps in 3 divisions placed in plated copper reflectors, which revolve on an upright axis, the whole making a revolution in 3 minutes. Consequently, a full light is exhibited to the mariners every minute, consuming about 1,100 gallons of oil annually. The gleam of light is perceptible about 27 miles distant. The lamps all the year are lighted up at sunset and extinguished at sunrise. Many years ago, the first house was lighted up with coals, which was not only an uncertain light, but also a fixed one, and was frequently mistaken. The labour and expense likewise attendant on this method were very great, for the light was kept up by means of a large bellows, which was incessantly worked like a blacksmith's forge, and the coals, which article is always at a high price in Cromer, could be brought up the hill only by small quantities at a time. In addition to which, the smoke and dirt caused by their consumption made the office of lighthouse keeper a most disagreeable and an unhealthy one. The lamps require to be trimmed every 3 hours, but as the attendance is shared by 2 persons, a comfortable portion of sleep is allowed to each, the night being divided between them. The annual salary formerly paid by the Trinity House to the lighthouse keeper was £50, it is now £100. When the writer of this article first visited Cromer, many years ago, the situation was held by 2 females, by whom the house was kept in such beautiful order as to form of itself an object of attraction and admiration. The floating light off Mundesley, 12 miles to the east, may be distinctly seen in the night from the town, where the cliffs are not so lofty as those near the lighthouse. Within the last 5 years the appearance of Cromer, viewed from the beach, has been materially changed. Before that time the undefended cliff alone presented itself to the eye, and the town seemed to stand much further back. A large subscription room, bath-house, and other edifices were constructed on the beach and side of the cliff, and apparent distance was given to the whole. At present the jetty appears buried under the town, and the tower of the church to frown over this change is owing to the following circumstance. In the month of February, 1837, an extraordinary high tide occurred, accompanied with a furious gale from the northwest, which washed the whole of the above-mentioned edifices away, and even for a time threatened the destruction of the town and church. For 2 days, the 17th and 18th of February, the storm continued to rage. The day previous had been particularly fine, and the wind was gentle. All had retired to rest in apparent security, fearless of the grand but capricious element which rolled near them. In the middle of the night, however, an alarm was given. The tide was rising to an unprecedented height, threatening to engulf all within its reach. In a few moments all was terror and confusion. The cliff was crowded with spectators. Every assistance was afforded to those immediately exposed to the fury of the mighty billows which poured in, and happily the loss of one life alone is to be deplored. This poor man was left in charge of Simons's bathing house. He was aroused, but whether he gave no heed to the admonition, or remained too long on the premises, is uncertain. He was borne away by the waters, together with the house, and his body was afterwards picked up at Bacton, near Mundesley, a distance of 10 miles. Morning presented an awful spectacle, and scarcely could the inhabitants recognize their own beach. But the alarm and the danger had not yet subsided. The wind continued to blow from the same quarter with equal violence throughout the day, and the tide was equally high. On the morning of the 18th, the cliff being undermined, fell in, bringing down with it one house. At the same time 2 vessels were lost, the one off the lighthouse hill, the other on the western edge of the town. The crew of the former were saved. 5 of those of the latter perished in an attempt to reach the shore by means of the boat. They were both from South Shields, which place they had left only 48 hours before the awful catastrophe occurred. The report of what had happened was speedily circulated through the neighborhood, and such was the interest that it excited, that the town for many days afterwards was filled with persons anxious to behold the devastation. From that time till the following year no steps were taken to protect the town from the increasing advance of the sea, but in the year 1838 a proposal was made to erect a safety wall for its defense. Accordingly the inhabitants subjected themselves to a rate in order to defray the expense, and the remainder of the sum estimated was raised by subscription. Those who had property on the cliff, and whose interest was thereby more particularly consulted, were rated at 20 shillings in the pound. Others who were more remotely benefited, at 10 shillings. It is sincerely wished that the means adopted for the security of the place will fully answer the end, but it is difficult for an inexperienced eyes at least, to watch the furious rage of the tide, and knowing what has occurred, not to fear what yet may be. A breakwater has also been raised as a further security to the place, and on the stability of this much necessarily depends. Whilst this continues firm, there is little to be apprehended if this were swept away. The breastwork which defends the cliff would be but a slight defence. The jetty, which formerly projected about 70 yards into the sea, was erected by subscription at the cost of £1,400 in 1822, after this old one had been destroyed by a furious storm. The high tide which we have just recorded did considerable injury likewise to the jetty, an injury which has not yet been entirely repaired. This is the fashionable resort in an evening, the company assembling here, some to enjoy the pure sea breezes, to watch the noble billows as they dash in graceful fury on the beach, the fine spectacle of the setting sun, or the mild splendor of the moon, others to meet their acquaintances, and a few, perhaps, whose discernment of the ridiculous is quicker than that of the sublime, for the exercise of their satirical talents. This promenade is certainly extremely agreeable. No one who has not witnessed a fine sunset at Cromer can have any idea of its magnificence, nor is the sunrise less beautiful, but few eyes, it may be presumed, are then open to view it. Cromer, indeed, possesses this double advantage, that the sun both rises and sets in the bosom of the ocean. During the season, a person who is paid gratuitously acts as a keeper of the jetty, whose business it is to prevent improper persons from obtruding themselves, and to preserve good order. We know not whether he has the power to forbid the smoking of cigars, but we certainly think that such ought to be the case, and we would add that we can hardly believe that any real gentleman would require an admonition on such a point. Servants in livery and all common persons are not allowed at this time. On Sunday the jetty is, with just consideration, resigned to the inhabitants of the town. The beach, having a fine firm sand and a level surface, affords excellent sea bathing, and every accommodation is supplied for the purpose. It is also much frequented when the tide is out, both as a promenade and for a drive. Indeed, the sands present a very gay and animated scene at this time, while the jetty is deserted. The carriage road to the beach is not so good as might be desired, but there are several convenient approaches to the beach and jetty by means of zigzag footpaths cut in the cliff, and terminating by easy staircases. A walk on the beach, whether to the east or the west of the town, is always delightful and interesting. Whether the grand expanse of waters on the one side, its waves breaking in hollow or harmonious melody, and winning us to meditation and calmness, the stupendous and broken cliffs, forming bold projections, or sinking into shadow, concealing in their breast the spoils of ages, or the treasures of the pebbly shore, be the objects of attraction, there is always enough to amuse, to gratify, and to benefit. The coast itself is particularly dangerous in consequence of the violent rising of the surf. No less than 4 or 5 lights are stationed between this place and Yarmouth, a distance of only 36 miles, to prevent vessels from running into Cromer Bay, which, by the by, has received the singular appellation of the Devil's Throat. Lifeboats are kept in readiness to succor the distressed, and nothing is omitted for their preservation which either the skill or courage of the fishermen can effect, or the generous and benevolent encouragement of individuals execute. We would not offend an amiable and much respected lady to whom this latter observation particularly refers, and therefore we abstain from saying more. True benevolence shrinks from all display, and is unconscious of its own merit, but the name and the remembrance of that lady will live long in the hearts of numbers who have been benefited by her liberality, or have witnessed her anxious superintendence at such seasons, accompanied with a fervent wish that she may long live to succor others, and to enjoy the approval of her own conscience. Cromer enjoys but little trade, there being no convenient harbour where ships might ride in safety. What there is, consists in the exportation of corn, and importation of coals, tiles, oilcakes, porter, etc. in vessels of from 60 to 100 tons burthen. These lie upon the beach, where, at ebb tide, carts are drawn alongside to unlade them, and, when empty, they anchor at a little distance from the shore, and reload by means of boats. This method of lading and unlading is very expensive, as the carts, though drawn by 4 horses, owing to the steepness of the roads up the cliff, can only carry about half a ton at a time. In this manner they continue passing and repassing till the water has risen so high as to oblige them to desist, and wait till the tide has again receded. About 2 tides generally serve to complete the ship's unloading. The sea at Cromer is almost always diversified by a change of moving objects, the trade from Newcastle, Sunderland, and the Baltic, keeping up a constant succession of vessels, to which may be added the regular appearance of the various steam vessels which ply between London and Scotland, giving life and interest to the scene, though defiling, as it were, the pure elements they have conquered by their ponderous volumes of black and waving smoke. In calm weather passengers may be landed from these vessels, in a boat sent for the purpose, but as the contingency of
wind and weather permitting
is always expressed, few dare avail themselves of such a conveyance. The cliffs, in many parts, are very lofty and picturesquely broken, and their base being, for the most part, composed of strong blue clay, or marl, are capable of making considerable resistance to the impetuous attacks of the sea, so that while the upper parts, which are chiefly of sandy materials, are brought down by accidental circumstances, the feet still remain, opposing their bold projections to the waves, and forming a happy relief to the level surface of the beach. This is no place to enter into any geological detail respecting these cliffs, but if the more scientific reader should desire information on this point, we would direct him to an admirable article in the
Philosophical Magazine,
from the pen of Mr. Lyle 13, or, what would be more acceptable, as well as attainable, we would venture to refer him to Mr. S. Simons of Cromer, who, we feel convinced, would afford him that information which he is so competent to give. In the winter the cliffs are the favourite resort of many seabirds, but in the summer some, as geese and ducks, retire to the marshes, while others entirely disappear. Cromer Church, which is dedicated to St. Peter and St. Paul, and was probably erected in the reign of Henry Roman IV, is a very handsome structure, built with flint and freestone, and consists of a nave and 2 aisles. The tower, which is square, with an embattled top, is 159 feet in height. The entrance at the west end, which is a beautiful specimen of Gothic architecture, is in ruins, as are also the north porch, and the chancel, of which little now remains. At one time indeed the other parts of the church were so much in ruins that divine service was performed in the tower. 14 many abbots' ornaments were destroyed by the soldiers of Cromwell, and the church itself converted into barracks. The flinting, in many parts of the building, can scarcely be excelled in the beauty of its execution. The nave and aisles are spacious and neatly fitted up, and made capable of containing a large congregation, but except the double row of arches which support the roof, and divide the aisles, very little of what it once was now remains. These, however, are of beautiful proportions. The windows, which were formerly of noble dimensions, and were decorated with painted glass, are, on the north side especially, either totally or partially closed, by the introduction of common bricks. It possesses a well-toned organ, and galleries have lately been erected by the contributions of the visitors and inhabitants, obtained through the strenuous exertions of the Rev. W. Sharp, whose conduct on the occasion deserves the sincere gratitude of all parties. Before these galleries were built, the fishermen used to sit together in the middle aisle, and they formed an impressive and pleasing spectacle. Our best feelings, as well as our gratifications, are much enhanced by the association of ideas, and it was next to impossible to behold these persons, many of whom were venerable with age, and not be put in remembrance of him whose the sea is, and who is so peculiarly the fisherman's protector. These men who do their
business in the great waters, and see the wonders of the Lord,
are themselves a testimony of his goodness. There is also something sacred in their occupation, which, added to the circumstances of their safety, thereby bringing them calmly to worship him in the haven where they would be, that arrests even the careless eye, and promotes devotion in the more serious. The church contains but very few monuments, and these belong principally to the Wyndham and Ditchell families. Indeed, with the exception of one to Mr. Rust, and another erected by the inhabitants to a singularly amiable and talented individual, a surgeon and general practitioner of the place, Mr. Charles Stuart Earl, with some ancient slabs, are all it can boast of. The following circumstance may seem trivial, but, as affording an instance of a providential escape, may not perhaps be unacceptable. At about a third part of the height of the staircase, which leads up to the steeple, is a door opening upon the leads of a small turret, communicating with the stairs, from which, some years ago, a boy of the name of Yaxley fell into the churchyard between some timbers, which were laid there for the repairs of the church, without receiving any other injury than a few slight bruises. He afterwards entered the navy, when, falling down the hold of the vessel to which he belonged, and receiving a severe hurt, he was discharged. Through the interest of the late Admiral Wyndham he obtained a pension, which he still lives to enjoy. The benefice is a vicarage, valued in the King's Book at £9 4s, and was augmented from 1,743 to 1,834, with £1,200 of royal bounty. The Rev. W. Sharp is the present incumbent. The living is in the gift of the Bishop of Ely, who is also a proprietor of the great tithes, now leased to the Countess of Listowel. Cromer enjoys the advantage of a free school, founded and endowed with £10 per annum by Sir Bartholomew Reid, a native of Cromer, and Lord Mayor of London, in 1502. The master, who was to be
a priest, cunning in grammar,
was enjoined to say Mass once a year in the parish church of Cromer, for the soul of the worthy founder, and to teach, with all good diligence,
gentlemen's sons, poor men's sons, and other good men's children of Cromer, and the villages around.
The former part of the duty is dispensed with, but the school still flourishes. The Goldsmiths' Company, who are the trustees, having rebuilt the schoolhouse in 1821, and augmented the master's salary at different times, and it now amounts to £130 per annum. Roger Bacon, a mariner of Cromer, is said to have discovered Iceland in the reign of Henry Roman IV, and also to have taken prisoner the Prince of Scotland, James Stuart, who was sailing to France in order to be educated there. A savings bank was established here in 1827. Petty sessions are held every alternate Monday. The Paw's land was let in 1786 for £10 a year. It now lets for 14 guineas. This is equally divided between 24 widows, who do not receive relief from the parish. The market, which was held every Saturday, under letters patent of Henry Roman IV, has been long discontinued, but the town is well supplied with provisions of all kinds. During the bathing season, persons from the country round bringing in poultry, butter, eggs, vegetables, etc. daily. Fish is not very plentiful, however, this depends upon the season. Mackerel, whitings, herrings, and cod are caught here. Its lobsters have long been noted for their excellence, as are also its crabs. Great quantities of these are caught and sent immediately to London. Lobsters are reckoned out of season, from the latter end of June to that of July. It also boasts of an annual fair which is held on Whit Monday. Cromer was first frequented as a watering place about the year 1785 by a few families of retired habits, whose favourable reports of the place induced others to follow their example. The accommodations, however, were long adverse to the influx of visitors, and the want of a respectable inn, in particular, was greatly felt, and was a material check, not so much to the actual prosperity of the place, but to its very existence as a place of general resort. At length, a spirited individual, the present venerable Mr. Tucker, built the new inn, which from that time to the present he has conducted with the greatest propriety, and with every regard to the comfort of those who have used his house. The character of Cromer thenceforth became altered, and various improvements followed. Indeed, the inhabitants of Cromer owe a large debt of gratitude to him, and if universal respect, and, it is to be hoped, just success to himself, can reward him, he receives his full recompense. There are several machines for sea bathing, the hour for which is regulated by the tide. The bather, Mr. Jacob, who is a very steady man, and the descendant of a line of bathers, lives in Jetty Street. There are 2 bathing houses, one on the cliff and the other by the side of it, on the beach, both of which are extremely well conducted, and kept by persons of respectability, by whom every requisite attention and civility are shown. Cromer now contains many comfortable private lodging houses, as well as apartments for the accommodation of its visitors, as also some respectable inns. One of the best houses in Cromer has lately been converted into a boarding house, under the name of the Hôtel de Paris. A number of houses, called the Crescent, have been built within the last 10 years, and are a great acquisition. Had the same spirit of speculation in building, etc. existed here as elsewhere, or the same encouragement, at least, been given to it, it is probable that long ere this, Cromer would have risen to considerable importance as a bathing place and fashionable resort, nature having done everything for it that might favour such a result. It has, however, been asserted, and perhaps with truth, that this spirit of improvement has been discountenanced on the ground that the moral welfare of the place was promoted by its comparative obscurity and non-intermixture with the idle and the more corrupted servants, etc. of cities and towns. The facilities of travelling to long distances too naturally tends to injure places which depend much on the local encouragement they receive. Persons who were once content to visit, summer after summer, the same place, or who chose that which their own neighbourhood made most convenient, are no longer detained by motives of expense or distance from indulging a taste for variety. The rent of the houses is high, and consequently that of lodgings is the same. The latter may be had at the rate of from 1.5 to 3.5 entire houses from 4 to 6 guineas a week. Those of the latter price, of which there are not more than 4 or 5, make up 10 beds, and are therefore capable of accommodating a large family. The inhabitants, almost universally speaking, are extremely civil and well-behaved, respectable in themselves, and respectful towards others, as simple in their manners, and free from that spirit of extortion which is but too commonly the fault of those who have only a short season to enable them to meet many exigencies, and who have only a partial interest in those they serve. The walks, drives, etc. around Cromer are exceedingly beautiful, affording the light to the geologist, botanist, and mineralogist, abundant materials for the gratification of their respective tastes. Many valuable organic and fossil remains are to be found in different parts of the coast, a circumstance to which the active researches of the late Mr. V.S. L. served materially to draw the attention of scientific persons. Professor Buckland and the learned Mr. Lyell have both honored Cromer by visiting it. Wild flowers are to be met with here in great beauty and luxuriance, some of them sufficiently rare to induce a long and health-giving walk in search of them. The seaweeds, or algae, are those which are generally found on our coasts, consisting of the great strapwort, Laminaria bladderwort, Fucus vesiculicus, serrated bladderwort, Fucus serratus, the beautiful crimson Placamium coccineum, the Ulva laticinae, etc. All these, when cast on the beach, are carefully collected in heaps and serve as manure to the lands. Jet and amber are found here in the winter. Jasper of all kinds, cornelian, aquamarine, and agates of every description, some of which are extremely beautiful, may be picked up on the beach. Many of the common pebbles, also, are remarkably handsome, and take a fine polish. The youthful student of mineralogy may also add to his collection specimens of micaceous schist, trapstone, porphyry, basalt, etc., etc. Shells, either fossil or recent, do not abound here, except in the upper chalk, which forms the substratum of the beach, and in isolated patches of the overlying crag, where a few rare fossil shells are found. Recent shells, indeed, are scarcely ever to be met with. The common periwinkle turbolatorius is, however, plentiful on the rocks at low water. We give no guide to the walks, they are all easily found, and there is a pleasure in making rambles for ourselves where every part of the country invites us to explore it. The best view of the town, however, is from a short distance on the Runton Road. Varley, so well known as an artist, has a very pleasing drawing taken from the spot to which we allude. The woods round Cromer Hall are a beautiful object from every direction. The hall itself is a handsome mansion, built in the Gothic style, with a centre and 2 wings. It was commenced in 1827 by George Thomas Wyndham, Esq., but was burnt down before it was finished, in 1829. It was rebuilt, and is now occupied by Henry Baring, Esq., brother of Lord Ashburton, who married Miss Cecilia Wyndham, another of the daughters of Admiral Wyndham. The following gentlemen also possess, and occasionally inhabit, handsome houses in or near the town. H. Birkbeck, Esq., Sir Jacob Astley, now Lord Hastings, Samuel Hoare, Esq., and Robert Herring, Esq. George Stanley Repton, Esq., is lord of the manor of Cromer Waylands, and of several other manors in the neighbourhood. Colney House is inhabited by Mrs. Morris. The season for Cromer is usually reckoned from the beginning of June till the middle or end of October. The place itself is never in such beauty as in the autumn, nor is it sea or the air more invigorating at any time than in the month of October. A mail coach arrives daily from Norwich at 12:30, and returns at 1:30. Letters, however, must be received at 1 o'clock, at which time the post office closes. On payment of a penny a letter will be forwarded the same day. Feedings, sociables, and also saddle horses may be had of Mr. Thomas Brown. There are subscription reading rooms, where the London and provincial papers are taken in daily, kept by Mr. Simons, and also a circulating library kept by Mrs. Leake. Carriers go once or twice a week to Norwich, Lynn, and other places in the neighbourhood. Excursion to Felbrigg. Returning either by the Holt Road or over Beeston Heath. The drives about Cromer are far more agreeable than persons have generally been led to suppose. The appearance of the country is picturesque and diversified, the roads themselves are good, and the sea, which is never long concealed from the view, forms at all times a beautiful object, sometimes appearing in wide expanse before us, sometimes seen only through an opening in the woods or over a rich valley, and at others breaking suddenly upon the eye, yet ever harmonizing most delightfully with the general features of the landscape. We do not usually associate the idea of rich foliage with the sea, but in this respect Cromer has a great advantage over most places on the coast, certainly over those on the eastern and northern. The soil, indeed, seems well suited to the growth of trees, many of which attain a very considerable size, and may vie in luxuriance of foliage as in height with those of more inland situations. The oak, Spanish chestnut, and beech, in particular, flourish here, and by their beauty afford a constant theme of admiration. There is no drive, however, prettier than that to the village and hall of Felbrigg, the seat and property of William Howe Wyndham, Esq. Felbrigg is 3 miles distant from Cromer, and is delightfully situated in the bosom of extensive and venerable woods. Almost as soon as you have entered the park, the tower of the church is seen on the left, rising in a most picturesque manner above the lofty trees which encircle it, and as the hall is approached, the drive continues between trees of the most striking beauty indeed. The beech trees are esteemed as some of the most remarkable in the kingdom, and are of an extraordinary size and circumference. The Hall is a large and handsome mansion, built in the Elizabethan style, on a commanding eminence, and stands in a park comprising about 200 acres of land. Considerable additions have been made to it at different periods, the greater part of which are in a style corresponding with the ancient south front. It contains many of the works of the most eminent painters, particularly of Rembrandt, Bergam, and Van der Velde. Among the best paintings may be enumerated A Usurer and the Portrait of an Old Woman by Rembrandt, Cow Stalled by Seytolven, Cheveling Market, and A Small Landscape by Paul Brill. The library comprises a large collection of valuable books and prints. The stables, built in the same style as the hall, were erected by the late Admiral Wyndham in 1825. On the skirts of the park, on a lofty eminence, stood formerly the cottage, mistaken by some for the rectory house. This has been lately pulled down, and the present rector lives at Metten, which is consolidated with Felbrigg, the rectory house. About a quarter of a mile southeast of the hall, surrounded by trees, is the church. This is a handsome edifice, and contains several monuments to the Felbrigg and Wyndham families. On a large marble slab is a very fine brass representing the figure, in complete armour, of Sir Simon de Felbrigg, who lived in the reign of Henry VI. The inspection of this alone would deserve a drive or a walk 26A to Felbrigg, for a more perfect specimen of the kind is rarely to be seen. On the south side of the altar is a beautiful monument, with a fine bust by Nollekins of the late Right Honourable William Wyndham, whose lamented death was caused by an injury he received in his endeavours to save the library of his friend Mr. F. North when his house in Berkeley Square was on fire. An operation had been recommended, and to this he submitted, but, as it proved, without success. This accomplished and amiable man died in the year 1810. Leaving no issue, his estates descended to his half-brother, the late Admiral Lucan, who assumed the name of Wyndham. 26b. The church at Felbrigg, like most others in this neighbourhood, is shorn of some of its honours. There is no vestry, although the ruins of one remain, and the entrance through the north porch is closed up, and the porch itself serves as a shelter to the sheep, which are turned into the churchyard. We regret the circumstance, as it appears to us a desecration of a building in which God has allowed his name to be put, and when we look
on this picture and on that,
the handsome mansion with all its comforts, and the house of God, as also the last resting place of the former owners of that mansion, we would not, where there is so much to admire and so little to lament, have a blade of grass grow irregularly on the one nor a stone left unevenly on the other. The manor of Felbrigg was purchased by Lord Scales of the executors of Sir Simon Felbrigg. He afterwards sold it to John Wyndham, Esq. when a curious circumstance took place, which does not speak well for the gallantry of the times, or at least for that of the party most concerned in it. Mr. Wyndham being absent, Sir John Felbrigg, who had set up an hereditary claim to the estate, entered the hole, from which he forcibly dragged out Mrs. Wyndham, himself taking possession of the mansion. However, he subsequently relinquished his claim for the payment of 200 marks. The park, from the unevenness of the ground, rising and falling gently into hills and vales, the richness of the woods, and the manner in which it has been laid out, is extremely beautiful. The drive lies exactly through it, passing close by the house. 28. There is also another way of approaching it, which is through the village and the new lodge gate at the east, and this also is very beautiful. On leaving the park, two roads present themselves, one on the right hand, which leads through a very shady lane, the extremity of which is called the Lion's Mouth, into the Holt Road, by which you may return to Cromer direct, or if the desire be to lengthen the drive, the road may be taken across the heath to Sheringham, Beeston, or Runton, where some of the most delightful prospects that wild scenery can afford will be successively presented to the eye. The descent to each of the former villages is most striking and romantic, and but one regret will arise, namely, that the roads are not well calculated for a carriage, being exceedingly sandy, and the ruts very deep. There is not, however, the slightest fear for those on horseback, nor indeed for those in a carriage, if attended by any one accustomed to the road. 29a. And certainly no one should leave Cromer in ignorance of the beauties which here offer themselves. Picnic parties are frequently formed to a valley on the right of the road, over the heath, which can be approached only on foot or on horseback. A spot is also shown on the top of the heath, which by some is stated to have been a Roman encampment, but it is much more probable the site of an ancient beacon. If on leaving the park gate the road in front be taken, and which is most proper for a carriage, the church of Ilmerton 29b will be passed. When turning immediately to the right, it will lead to the Holt Road, only a little higher than the entrance from the Lion's Mouth. The drive will consist in that case of about 6 miles, if the road across the hills be taken, of 7. Excursion to Mundesley. To Overstrand, Siderstrand, to Trimmingham, returning by southwards. The drive from Cromer to Mundesley presents some of the finest sea views imaginable. The road runs almost entirely along the coast, taking in its course the villages of Overstrand, Siderstrand, and Trimmingham. About 2 miles e/s of Cromer is the small parish of Overstrand, which extends 2 miles along the sea cliffs and is bounded inland by a lofty range of hills. On the beach is a hamlet and fishing station commonly called Becoy, with a curing house and a free school, the latter built and supported, during her lifetime, by the late amiable and lamented Miss Buxton. It is now carried on by Miss Gurney, of Northop's Cottage. This old church, like that of Shipton, was swallowed up by the sea, which catastrophe took place in the reign of Richard Roman II. The present, which is dedicated to St. Martin, was then built on half an acre of ground given by John Rames, but the chancel and part of the nave are in ruins. The remainder is walled in, and fitted for divine service. The living, which is very small, is in the gift of Lord Suffield. In the year 1250, 34 hen. Roman 3. A duel or combat of trial was fought on account of this lordship, on behalf of Agnes de Rames. Foulness, or Cromer Lighthouse, is in this parish. Siderstrand is a small parish, containing not more than 400 acres of land, partly belonging to Samuel Hoare, Esq. the lord of the manor, and patron of the living, which is a rectory, alternately with the sovereign as Duchess of Lancaster. 31. The church, dedicated to St. Michael, stands on a solitary eminence, and in appearance and loneliness reminds the traveller of the sacred edifices which salute his eye in the Isle of Man. Not a tree or a bush casts a shade near it, the dead alone in their solitude surround it, and the deep calm is broken only by the hollow dash of the billows, or the occasional screech of the sea mew. Still continuing in view of the sea, you reach Trimmingham, which stands on the highest ground in Norfolk. The cliffs are here not less than 300 feet high. It is 5 miles east of Cromer, and the same distance and by east of North Walsham. The ocean here also gains considerably on the coast. Several years ago, 2 farmhouses, with their yards and outbuildings, were washed down by the sea. This accident was owing to the choking up of a spring, which occasioned such a subterraneous body of water, that several acres of land, as well as these buildings, were detached from the mainland and washed into the sea. The church stands on the highest point of the cliffs. It was formerly a favorite resort of the superstitious and ignorant, for its ancient priests pretended that they were in the possession of the hand of St. John the Baptist, an imposition which was a source of considerable wealth to them, as pilgrims from all parts visited it, making large offerings in honor of the precious relic. The living is in the gift of the crown. Part of the glebe land has been washed into the sea. On a hill about a mile from the village are to be seen the ruins of an old beacon. This hill commands an exceedingly fine prospect both of the sea and land. In very clear weather Yarmouth is discernible, and the spire of Norwich Cathedral is seen without difficulty. This spot has gained such celebrity for the extensive view it affords, that few persons quit Cromer without having visited it. It is said that no less than from 30 to 40 churches may be counted from hence. About 2 miles further on is Mundesley, which from a mere straggling village has become of sufficient importance to rank next to Cromer as a watering place, a circumstance owing chiefly to the spirited exertions of F. Wheatley, Esq, although it is, and must continue to be, greatly inferior to that place in every respect. It is distant from Cromer 7 miles. Like Cromer, it is situated on the lofty and broken cliffs of the ocean, which, however, are here divided by a deep ravine, through which a small stream discharges itself upon the beach, which at low water has a broad firm sand, and, like Cromer, it is subjected to the formidable encroachments of the sea. To remedy this, the above-named liberal individual erected, at the cost of £1,000, a massive wall, forming an upper and a lower terrace, the latter of which, being 90 feet above the beach, commands a most extensive and delightful view of the ocean. In the year 1837, during the same extraordinary high tides that ravaged Cromer, this wall was in part destroyed, and was repaired at a cost little inferior to the first. The prospect upon the beach to the southward differs greatly in appearance from that of Cromer, the land at Happisburgh projecting into the sea, forming a promontory. There are 2 good inns here, and several respectable lodging houses, with bathing machines, a warm bath, and other necessary accommodations for visitors. The church, dedicated to All Saints, stands on a lofty point of the cliff above the village, and was formerly a noble edifice, but the tower is gone, and the chancel and part of the nave are in ruins. The remaining part of the nave has been repaired, and is fitted up for divine service. The living is in the gift of the crown. The place derives interest from the circumstance of the father of Archbishop Tennyson having been ejected from this living in 1640 for his loyalty to the ill-fated and amiable monarch Charles I. Returning by Southwarps, we are struck with its church, which is one of the most beautiful in the neighbourhood, and, as usual, is built on an eminence. It is dedicated to St. James. In the year 1788 the side aisles were taken down, and the arches filled up. The living is in the gift of the crown. The parsonage house is situated near it. On a hill, about a mile from the village, are the ruins of an old beacon, which commands a fine view of the sea and surrounding country. Southwarps is 5 miles from Cromer and 1 from Thorpe. The drive consists of 17 miles. Northwarps Hall and Cottage. A short and very pleasant drive may be made, by taking the road to Northwarps, and having passed the Hall and Hill House, both belonging to Richard Gurney, returning by the road leading to the cottage. This mansion, which is sometimes also called the Hermitage, is inhabited by Miss Gurney, and for its romantic situation is greatly admired. It stands in a deep valley opening towards Overstrand and the sea. It is flinted in the Gothic style, and the porch is thatched and fitted up with great taste and simplicity. The grounds and woods by which it is surrounded are extremely beautiful. On an eminence called Tolsale, not far from the cottage, is a very fine echo, produced by a bold and lofty range of hills on the opposite side of the vale, and extending between it and the sea from Overstrand to Siderstrand. Excursion to Thorpe and Gunton Hall, returning by Rotten. Taking the Norwich Road, we proceed to the village of Norththorpe, which is divided into two parts, called Church Street and Far Street, containing about 2,600 acres of land, picturesquely broken into hill and dale, and belonging chiefly to Lord Suffield. The church, dedicated to St. Mary, though not equal to Souththorpe's, is a noble building, with a lofty square tower. The patronage is vested in the Crown. The rectory house and free school, which he also endowed, were both erected at the cost of the late incumbent, the Rev. Thomas Hay, D.D. Leaving now the Norwich Road, and taking that to North Walsham, we reach Thorpe Market, which is a small but extremely pretty village, about a mile from Gunton Hall, 4.5 from North Walsham, and the same from Cromer. The present church is much and deservedly admired for the simplicity and elegance of its construction. It is dedicated to St. Margaret, and was partly built on the site of the old one by the second Lord Suffield, who died in 1821. It consists only of a single arch, of flint stone and freestone, with turrets at the angles, and a gable on each side, surmounted by a cross. The windows are ornamented with painted glass, as are also the upper parts of two light Gothic screens, which divide the chancel and the west end from the centre part, which is fitted up for divine service. It contains 3 ancient monuments taken from the old church, and a handsome one by Reinhardt, erected to the memory of 2 brothers of the noble founder. The vault of the Rants, formerly lords of the manor, was under the old church, but is now securely bricked up in the churchyard. Close to the church are extensive gardens, to which parties are made, to eat strawberries and cream, etc. An oak stands there, which, for beauty and size, attracts universal admiration, and is, in fact, one of the lions of the place. 36 some Spanish chestnuts also, near the church gate, are very fine. Leaving Thorpe for Gunton Hall, the seat of the right Hon. Lord Suffield, you pass, at the northeast angle of the park, under the arch of an elegant tower, rising to the height of 120 feet 6 inches, from which an extensive prospect is afforded of the surrounding country. The hall itself is an elegant edifice built of white brick, and it was much enlarged under the direction of Mr. Wyatt in 1785. It stands on an eminence commanding a very fine view of the park and its plantations, which occupy not less than 942 acres. More attention has been paid in the interior to comfort than to splendor, in which respect it is not to be exceeded. The gardens are extensive and tastefully laid out. The park is well stocked with deer, and is noted for the number of pheasants and hares with which it abounds. From the Thorpe Road an avenue is pointed out, which extends 2 miles, and opens into the park, through which the view is perfectly unobstructed. A fine lake lies on the left as we leave the park through the Hamworth Lodge, where the trees again form an avenue, naturally, and in a most picturesque manner, interlacing their luxuriant branches, and forming a canopy over the road. The church, dedicated to St. Andrew, has a handsome portico of the Doric order, and was rebuilt by Sir William Morden Harbord, Bart, who became possessed of the estate in 1742. The rectory is consolidated with Hanworth, and is in the gift of Lord Suffield. The house is shown to visitors. There is little to be noticed at Rawdon, except that it is a pleasant village in an open vale, containing about 1,100 acres of land, of which 376 are of heath. The church is a vicarage, of which the Bishop of Ely is patron. It boasts of a free school, endowed with 36 acres of land, founded by Robert Brown early in the 17th century. Walton is 4 miles from Cromer. The drive consists of nearly 14 miles. Excursion to Sheringham. Through Runton and Beeston. The drive to Runton is by some considered the least pleasing of any round Cromer. We hardly know how to subscribe to this opinion, for the sea view is extremely fine, and there are points of inland beauty belonging to it which are very striking. As we before observed, the town itself, to be seen to advantage, should be viewed from this road. Runton parish comprises 2 small villages, called East and West Runton, and is from 1 to 2 miles distant from Cromer. It contains about 1,000 acres of land, subject to the encroachments of the ocean, and is bounded on the south by a lofty range of hills. The high hill to the left is known by the name of Rinkeborough Hill. The church, which is dedicated to the Holy Trinity, stands on an acclivity above West Runton, and is a rectory, united with Almaden. East Runton is a mere fishing village, nearly a mile east of the church, on a small green. Sir T. F. Buxton owns a very neat mansion here. About a mile distant is the small village of Beeston, or as it is distinguished from others of the same name, Beeston Regis, or Beeston on the Sea, which adjoins Lower Sheringham. The church, which is near the beach, is dedicated to All Saints, and is a rectory, of which the patronage is vested in the Duchy of Lancaster. The object of attraction here, however, to the visitor, is the ruins of its ancient priory, which stand at the east end of the village in a romantic dale, sheltered from the cold winds of the north by lofty hills, yet so situated as to command a noble view of the sea and of the surrounding country. The site, indeed, of all the religious houses of old was so invariably selected on principles of the best taste, and with the utmost regard to the local advantages and conveniences of the place, that a recollection of the fact should always draw attention to the point, with a view to discover what these were. The priory was dedicated to St. Mary, and was founded in the reign of King John by the Lady Isabel, or, as some say, by the Lady Elizabeth the Cressy, for canons of the Order of St. Augustine. At the dissolution it was granted to Sir Edward Wyndham and others. A small tower, and the whole of the west gable wall of the priory church are standing, together with many other large masses of walls, over which the
ruin-loving ivy
extends its faithful embraces. Some years ago the ivy grew most luxuriantly, but it was ruthlessly cut down, since which time, though its growth has been encouraged, it has not recovered its original beauty. To see these ruins to advantage, they should be visited in the evening, when the glowing yet subdued rays of the setting sun illuminating the most picturesque parts of the abbey and the surrounding landscape, and throwing others into deep and harmonious shade, a picture is presented to the careless observer which cannot fail to give gratification, and to awaken in the more meditative that train of melancholy but pleasing thought, which seems so peculiarly to belong to such spectacles and to such seasons. Lower Sheringham, which is nearly a mile and a half distant from the church, is situated on lofty sea cliffs, rising nearly 100 feet from the beach. These cliffs are divided by a narrow ravine, through which a small rivulet and a road winds down the beach. It is a considerable fishing station, having several curing houses. Cod, skate, whitings, crabs, and lobsters are caught here in abundance, particularly the 2 latter, of which great quantities are sent to London by vessels which receive the fish from the boats whilst at sea. The sea makes continual encroachments here as on other places on this coast. During an extraordinary high tide, which occurred on the 22nd of October, 1800, a large inn was precipitated in ruins upon the beach, but providentially its inhabitants had sufficient warning of their danger to save themselves and much of their furniture. A new inn has been since erected. There are a few traces of a chapel, dedicated to St. Nicholas, still to be seen. The lovers of the sublime will do well to visit the cliffs of this place. From hence to Upper Sheringham the road becomes exceedingly picturesque and beautiful, and is not to be exceeded by any other in the neighbourhood. The estate which lies to the right, together with a handsome mansion erected upon it, belonged to the late A. Upshur-esque and is now in possession of his son. The house E nearest the road, and which is often mistaken for the Hall, the seat of H. Upshur-esque, is inhabited by the Hon. Mrs. Upshur, the widow of the above gentleman, a lady of whom it may truly be said by the poor of her neighbourhood, that she is
feet to the lame, and eyes to the blind,
and a friend to all. The church, which is dedicated to All Saints, is a vicarage, of which the Bishop of Ely is the patron. It is a very neat structure, and is kept in excellent repair. It boasts of only 2 or 3 slabs with brasses upon them, and 1 monument, by Bacon, erected in the chancel to the memory of Mr. Upshur, but this is well worthy of inspection. The design is elegantly conceived and admirably executed, yet so simple and touching, and the inscription it bears is so impressive, that it can scarcely fail to do, what, indeed, all such mementos ought to do, and are perhaps intended to do, affect the heart of the observer, and recall a truth to his mind, which is too often forgotten, that all on earth is fleeting and unstable. Near the church is a large reservoir, which was formed in 1814 to supply the village with water, brought in pipes from a spring on the neighbouring hill. The school is supported by Mrs. Upshur, for the education of 30 boys and 50 girls, who each pay 1 penny per week. If the visitor desire to view Sheringham Hall, the mansion and grounds of H. Upshur-esque, he should take the upper road, as it is called, leaving Cromer by the Holt Road, by which means he will not only gain the most advantageous view of each, but avoid the ascent of a very long and high hill. Entering the lodge gate direct from the road, he will proceed for nearly a mile through a path road through the grounds, which for boldness, beauty, and variety is unequalled in this part of the country, and would not disgrace even some of the more favoured spots in Wales. If the gurgling of the concealed stream, or the gush of falling water were heard, the characteristic accompaniment of Welsh scenery, the delusion would be complete, as it is surprise and pleasure divide the attention. After winding down the hill for some time, occasionally obtaining a fine prospect of the ocean, and seating to advantage the house inhabited by the Hon. Mrs. Upshur, we suddenly come in view of the Hall itself, which is a handsome and commodious edifice. Its situation is well chosen, overlooking a fine bay of the ocean, and sheltered by a woody acclivity. The ground everywhere rises into bold swells, and is adorned with trees from their summits to their base, united by gentle slopes to the rich valleys,
spotted with white sheep,
that divide them. The effect of alternate light and shade on these at a distance is delightfully shown, and the whole scenery is such as may equally gratify the painter and the lover of nature. One pensive thought, however, is awakened by the recollection that the amiable individual who erected the mansion and in part 44 adorned the surrounding grounds, did not live to inhabit the one or to enjoy the other. Mr. Upshur died in the flower of his age, in 1819, just before the house was completed, leaving a widow and several young children, and is interred in a mausoleum which he built adjoining the church. Having passed the house, the road leads into the Lower Road, to Beeston and Runton, or by taking the road to the left, you may reach Weybourne, where the cliff ends. The drive to Upper Sheringham by the Lower Road, or Runton, consists of 5 miles, by the Upper, or Holt, 6 miles. If extended to Weybourne, 8 miles. Excursion to Blickling, Elsham, through Rawdon. Having already noticed Rawdon, we proceed without anything particular to observe, till we are within a short distance of Erpingham, when we pass, on the left, the rectory house of Hanworth, which is very delightfully situated on the verge of Gunton Park, about 2 miles from Erpingham, which place lies to the right. To those versed in chivalric law, this village will be interesting. Sir Thomas de Erpingham, the gallant favourite of the renowned John of Gaunt, and one of the sharers of the glories of the field of Agincourt, taking his name from this place, of which he and his predecessors were lords of the manor. The church and tower were begun in his time, but finished some years after his death. It contains inscriptions to the memory of the family, and a very perfect brass of Sir John Erpingham, whose son, Sir John, lies buried under a large stone at the east end of the south aisle. The arms are lost, but his effigy in armour remains, as standing on a lion at each corner of the stone is the emblem of one of the evangelists. The church, dedicated to St. Mary, has a tall square tower, on the summit of which were the effigies of 4 confessors in their habits, carved in freestone, 3 only of which are remaining, the 4th having been struck down by a violent tempest, which occurred during divine service, and killed one of the congregation. This happened about a century ago. The living, which is a rectory, is in the gift of the Dowager Lady Suffield. At a short distance further, we pass on the left the remains, for it can scarcely be called otherwise, of the ancient church of Ingworth, which appears to be of the age of William Rufus. It is dedicated to St. Lawrence, and had formerly a round tower, which fell down in the year 1812. The rectory is in the gift of W. H. Wyndham-esque. The whole of the drive lies through a richly wooded and fertile country, which, as Blickling is approached, becomes more beautiful. The first sight of the whole is very striking and imposing, and the general view of it gives an excellent idea of the grandeur and regularity of the buildings of former ages. Blickling Hall, the seat of the Dowager Lady Suffield, is a large quadrangular mansion of brick, and forms a perfect specimen of architectural taste in the reign of James I, in which reign it was commenced, but not finished till that of Charles I. It has 2 open courts in the centre, with turrets at the angles, and a large clock tower over the entrance, standing in a beautiful park of 700 acres, 46 well stocked with deer, and extending into the adjacent parishes of Alton and Itteringham. The entrance from the court in front, formed by the offices and stables, is over a bridge of 2 arches across the moat. On an ancient oak door in the front is the date, Anno Domini 1620. This is within an arch, the keystone of which bears a grotesque figure, and over the entablature is a rich compartment, bearing the arms and quarterings of Sir Henry Hobart, Bart. The entrance hall measures 42 feet by 33, and is 33 feet in height, opening to the great staircase of oak. This is ornamented with various figures, carved in wood, and conducts to a grand gallery containing statues of Anne Boleyn and Queen Elizabeth. These apartments, which are spacious, are adorned with rich chimney-pieces, ceilings, wainscots, etc., but the paintings are not very numerous or very valuable. The most remarkable room is the library, which is 127 feet in length by 21 in breadth, and consequently rather offends the eye, as not being well proportioned. The ceiling is divided into compartments containing figures emblematical of the 5 senses, with others in relief, many of which are not a little grotesque. The library contains upwards of 10,000 volumes, amongst which are some very scarce and valuable works. The grounds are very beautiful. A lake, one of the finest pieces of water in the kingdom, forms the principal ornament of the park and gardens. This extends in the form of a crescent, about a mile in length and 400 yards in its greatest breadth, and is skirted by verdant lawns and thickly wooded hills, which give a most charming effect. The conduit and statues are those which formerly adorned the platform of Oxnead Hall, one of the residences of the Earl of Yarmouth, 2.5 miles from Aylsham, of which the sole remains are 1 wing, occupied by a farmer. About a mile from the hall is a stone mausoleum, built in the form of a pyramid, upon a base of 4 to 5 feet, in which are deposited the remains of the late Earl of Buckinghamshire and his 2 wives, but the remains of 19 of his ancestors and relations are deposited in a vault, the coffin standing in an upright position, under the north aisle of the church. There are many circumstances connected with Blickling which render it exceedingly interesting. The manor was held by Harold, the unfortunate competitor of the crown with the Norman William. The Conqueror settled the whole manor and Advocacy on the scene of Thetford afterwards. On the foundation of Norwich Cathedral, the bishops of Norwich held the demesne in their own hands, and had here a palace with a fine park adjoining. In 1431, Blickling became the property of Sir Thomas Erpingham, and having passed through several hands it came into the possession of Sir Thomas Boleyn, the father of the beautiful and unfortunate Anne Boleyn, who was married from this place, Henry Roman VIII, having come to Blickling personally to wed her. Nor was this the only royal visit paid to it, Charles Roman II, and his amiable consort having visited it in his progress through the county, in 1671. Blickling passed from the Boleyns to the Hobarts, ancestors of the Earl of Buckinghamshire, when the old mansion was pulled down, and the present rebuilt by Sir John Hobart, which was completed in 1628. The second Earl rebuilt the west front in 1769, when his countess, as appears by an inscription over the door of this part, bequeathed her jewels towards defraying the expenses. The church, dedicated to St. Andrew, stands on an eminence near the hall, and contains many inscriptions to the former lords of the manor, with a few small effigies and brasses. One of these is for Anne Boleyn, the aunt of the unhappy queen, which exhibits the first example of a necklace. A mile and a half from Blickling is the neat and well-built market town of Aylsham, which for beauty of situation is not exceeded by any in the county. It has a very flourishing appearance, and several excellent houses are built in or near it. The Bure, which runs at the foot of the town, is navigable to Yarmouth for boats of 40 tons burthen. During the reigns of Edward Roman II and Roman III it was celebrated for a manufacture of linen, then called
Aylsham Webs, cloth of Aylsham.
This was superseded by the woolen manufacture, and in the time of James I the inhabitants were chiefly employed in knitting worsted stockings, waistcoats, etc. The introduction of framework knitting has destroyed this branch of trade likewise. The court of the Duchy of Lancaster was formerly held here. It was once noted for its spa, the water of which was esteemed efficacious in cases of asthma and other chronic diseases. The spring is about half a mile south of the town. The church, dedicated to St. Michael, is a handsome Gothic structure, situated on the summit of an abrupt acclivity, commanding a very fine view of the surrounding country. It is said to have been built by John of Gaunt, whose arms appear in various parts of the walls. It contains many monumental inscriptions and brasses, among which is one to Thomas Wines, who is represented in his winding sheet. He caused the screens and roof to be painted with saints, martyrs, etc. Part of this work has lately been discovered, and is in good preservation. The fount has bas-relievos of the 4 emblems of the evangelists, the instruments of the Passion, and the arms of Gaunt. The interior of the church is very handsome, but is much injured in appearance by the irregularity of the pews, if not by the introduction of pews altogether. The benches, no doubt, were formerly much ornamented with carving, many rich specimens of which are remaining. The most beautiful of these have been collected, and with admirable taste arranged for a screen for the altar. The patronage of the living, which is a vicarage, is vested in the Dean and Chapter of Canterbury. Aylsham enjoys the advantage of a free school. Archbishop Parker also founded 2 fellowships in Corpus Christi College, Cambridge, and appropriated them to this and Wymondham School. One of the scholars must be born in Aylsham, but it is requisite for the other to be educated only at the free school there. Blickling is 11 miles from Cromer. Aylsham, by the direct road, is the same distance. Excursion to Bacton. Through Mundesley, returning by Paston, Knapton, and Trunch. A pleasant excursion may be made to Bacton, a village 12 miles from Cromer, on the low road to Yarmouth, where the ruins of Bromham Priory deserve attention. This priory was founded by William de Glanville, for Cluniac monks, as a cell to Catholic Priory, in 1113, and dedicated to St. Andrew. Like many others, it owed much of its former wealth to fraud and superstition. A cross was here preserved, which was said to be made of the wood of that on which our Saviour suffered, and which was possessed of such virtues, that 19 blind persons, it is gravely asserted, were restored to sight by it. At the dissolution it was granted, with the adjacent estate, to Sir Thomas Woodhouse, ancestor of the present nobleman of that name. The building, like that of almost every other in Norfolk, was chiefly of flint. The hand of time has been ruthless in its damages. A lofty pointed arch gateway is the only part still entire, the walls being, in many places, only a few feet high. Paston is distant from Bacton about 3 miles. The church, which is dedicated to St. Margaret, boasts of several handsome monuments to the Paston family, of which the Earls of Yarmouth are the representatives, and who formerly possessed the manor. One of these, erected to the memory of Lady Catherine Paston, wife of Sir Edmund Paston, deserves notice. On it is a recumbent effigy of that lady, beautifully executed, in 1629, by Nathaniel Stone, at the cost of £340. John Mack, Esq. possesses a neat mansion here, which was erected on the site of the old one, formerly the seat of the Paston family. The late celebrated Sir Astley Paston Cooper derived descent, by his mother's side, from this family. Napton is situated on a lofty eminence 3 miles from North Walsham, and 1 from Paston. The object of attraction here is the roof of the church, which is of Irish oak, richly ornamented with carvings of saints and angels. The church is dedicated to St. Peter and St. Paul, and has a nave and chancel, with a tower at the west end. The rectory is in the alternate gift of Lord Suffield and the Master and Fellows of St. Peter's College, Cambridge. Proceeding another mile we reach Trunch Church, the tower of which, rising above the trees that surround it, forms a beautiful object, in every direction from which it is viewed. The church, dedicated to St. Botolph, contains an ancient font, which is well worthy of inspection. The proximity of this parish, with several others, has given rise to the following familiar
Memoranda.
Shrimingham, Gimmingham, Napton, and Trunch, Southwarps and Northwarps lie all in a bunch.
The return by the latter places shortens the length of this excursion by 1 mile. Excursion to Barningham and Wolselden. We may without fear or hesitation promise the visitor the greatest enjoyment from this excursion, whether the charms of a rich and highly cultivated country, the view of ruins,
Graceful in decay.
or the works of art be most accordant with his taste. Having taken the Hulch Road for 3 miles, we turn off to Gresham, and proceed to Barningham Town, or Barningham Wints, a village consisting of about 500 acres, belonging to John Thurston Mott, Esq. On entering the grounds, we are instantly struck with the beautiful landscape that surrounds us, and with the richness of the prospect, but our admiration is complete as we reach the picturesque ruins of the church which stands in the park. Anything more lovely we have seldom if ever beheld. The ruins, which are extremely fine, are covered with luxuriant ivy, but there is no appearance of decay here to offend the eye, or to pain the heart, nor even to raise a sigh of regret for the past. The chancel has been put into perfect repair, and most appropriately and liberally fitted up for divine service. All around is calm, holy, happy. True taste, true devotional feeling pervades throughout. There the dead seem to
Sleep sweetly.
not in the sadness of death, but in the tranquillity of repose, not in the gloom that oppresses the heart, but in the peace that speaks of hope. No straggling foot disturbs the green winding sheet of the slumbers below. The light foot of the bird alone, which hath found there a place to build her nest, presses it, and the robin in privileged security chants from the spreading boughs that wave nigh a requiem over the departed. Not a weed is allowed to obtrude a leaf, the rank grass sighs not there, nor does the thistle shake there its downy head to the wind. The house of God, and
The house appointed for all living.
have been equally respected, and a striking proof afforded how much the beauty of holiness may be enhanced by the spirit of cheerfulness. We are utter strangers to Mr. Mott, we know only his name, though in so saying we may
Hide yourselves unknown.
that he is patron of the living of Barningham, and that he inhabits the venerable mansion, which is near the church, but what we have seen and do know commands our esteem, and we gratefully give it. 2 miles beyond Barningham is Wolston Hall, the seat of the Right Honourable the Earl of Alford and Baron Walpole. 55. Respecting this handsome mansion, we will quote the words of a former tourist.
Wolterton was purchased by Lord Walpole soon after his marriage. At that time, it consisted of a small mansion, with landed property of not more than £500 per annum, which he afterwards considerably increased by purchase. The house being burnt down during his embassy, he built the present seat in 1736, which is styled in Walpole's Anecdotes one of the best houses of the size in England. It was built after the designs of Ripley. The date is given in the following inscription placed over the door of the eastern entrance.
Horatius Walpole has des. They, des, and DCCXXVI. Inch of it. They, s, and DCCXLI. Her facet.
Like most of Ripley's houses, Wolterton is built with a basement story and offices beneath, and consequently appears much less considerable in size and extent of accommodation than in fact it is. It is nearly a square pile, 3 sides of which have views on the park and pleasure grounds, and to the fourth, eastward, is appended a large quadrangle, comprising the spacious kitchen offices. Towards the north a handsome domestic chapel. To the south, this has been removed, and a new one is now building to the east, and communicating by an arched gatehouse to the east, with the stables and the kitchen gardens. The building is of brick, with chimneys, cornices, and dressings of the doors and windows in Portland stone, and is of so solid and durable a character, that the lapse of nearly a century has produced no apparent ill effect on its condition or appearance. The great hall on the north side was approached by a lofty flight of stone steps, which, as ill-suited to the climate and habits of England, were removed by the late Earl, and a commodious entrance 20 feet square, made in the basement story beneath. The great staircase which fills the centre of the building, and is lighted from above, is in a rich and massive style of architecture, and extending down to the basement, serves as the approach from the present entrance to the principal apartments.
Towards the south, in the center of the house, is the library paneled in mahogany 32 feet by 24, containing a large collection of the ancient editions in various departments of literature, with much that is valuable of a more modern date. On the east side is the old dining room, on the west the old drawing room, each 25 feet by 20, which have been till lately the customary living rooms of the family.
On the principal floor in the center of the north front is the great hall, 29 feet by 24 feet 6 inches, and 20 feet high. On the west side are portraits of Horatio, 1st Lord Walpole, of Wolterton, of his son Horatio, 2nd Lord Walpole, of Wolterton, and 4th Lord Walpole, in whom the title of Earl of Orford was revived in 1806, and of Horatio, late and 6th Earl of his family, his son and heir in parliamentary robes by Lane. Opposite, a large hunting subject temporarily removed by Wotton, with portraits of Sir Robert Walpole, with Sir Charles Turner, and General Churchill, and of his favourite hunters and hounds. In the front of the door, Sir Robert Churchill in uniform, and Mr. Charles Churchill his son, who, by Lady Mary his wife, youngest daughter of Sir Robert Walpole, was maternal grandfather of Horatio, present and 7th Earl of Orford. Disposed in different parts of the hall are some beautiful vases in antique marbles and alabasters, as also objects of sculpture, among which is a bust in bronze of Napoleon Bonaparte, from the collection of Monsieur Denon, and highly appreciated by him. A Cupid and Psyche, of natural size, in statuary, by Fanelli, a work of great beauty and perfection, and also a Venus, the size of life, by the same artist, in the manner of the Venus de Medicis. On the left of the whole is the private family seat of the Earl and Countess, containing some interesting cabinet pictures. A very fine portrait in full length of Oliver Cromwell in Armagh was formerly in this room, but is now removed to a bedroom. On the right is the principal dining room, with a fine portrait over the fireplace of Caroline, Queen of George II in her robes by Amiconi, presented by Her Majesty to Mr. Walpole on his completing Walterden, with other presentation portraits of the family of George Roman II and in full length, in the panel portraits of Charles I in armour, and of George I in his coronation robes, and George Roman II in half armour. Portraits also of Rachel, Lady Walpole, grandmother of the present Earl, daughter of William, the Duke of Devonshire, and of Harriet, daughter of General Churchill, wife of Sir Everard Faulkner, with her son, a child, the late Mr. Faulkner, the father of the present Countess of Orford. On a marble table of large dimensions is a noble bust of Sir Robert Walpole, by Risbrigg, with the Star of the Order of the Garter, in his robes. A fine Rembrandt is also here in the subject, a Jew convert. An early picture by Opie of children with a dog. In advance of the whole, towards the southern suites of apartments, is the great staircase, where, on a pedestal of Egyptian porphyry, is a colossal bust of Napoleon Bonaparte, the only existing copy of Canover's original portrait model, of which was formed the ideal head of the statue in the Place Vendôme. The saloon front 35 feet 6 inches by 25 feet 6 inches, and 20 feet high, finished in the rich and highly decorated style of that period. 1741. Between the windows are two fine tables of oriental alabaster, of large dimensions, with many beautiful objects in sculpture, and in Dresden porcelain, to which have lately been added several casts of exquisite beauty, brought from Rome. Over the chimney-piece is a beautiful portrait of Louis Roman XV in his youth, in half armour, with a royal mantle, presented by His Majesty to Mr. Walpole, when ambassador at Paris. An original head of Pope by Richardson. Cardinal Fleury, by Rigaud, given by himself to Mr. Walpole. A view of Holland of large size. The celebrated landscape by Rubens called
The Rainbow.
Late in the collection of Mr. Watson Taylor, generally considered as the chef-d'oeuvre of this great master in the department of landscape. Andrea Sabattina. Crucifixion. A Christ bearing his cross, the Virgin kneeling by him in full size by Murillo. A picture of exquisite merit. A Spanish girl. In the drawing room, to the right of the saloon, are three beautiful Canalettis, one a view of St. Mark's Cathedral, another a general view of the city of Venice, the third a view in Venice. The Dutch Wedding, by an unknown master of great perfection and beauty of finish. A Landscape with Cattle by Castiglione. An exquisitely finished picture of flowers, with the head of our Saviour in the centre in chiaroscuro, by J. David de Heim. A cabinet picture of Bergam, also a beautiful cast brought lately from Rome by Lord Orford. In Lady Orford's room, on the left of the saloon, is a noble chimney-piece, in vert antique, with sculpture and statuary, surrounded by a portrait of Louis Roman XIV. In armour, by Gervers. This room is hung with fine Gobelin tapestry, as are also part of the drawing room and small dining room. The chairs, sofas, etc. are here covered with tapestry, the fables of Aesop forming the principal subjects. The park is of great extent, comprising upwards of 700 acres of land. The fine beech and oaks which adorn it were chiefly planted by the first Lord Walpole. On the south side of the whole is a bold terrace with a parapet, surmounted with urns, adjacent to which is a beautiful garden, sloping to the margin of an extensive lake, the banks of which are richly clothed with wood, the whole forming, with the distant view of Blickling, a piece of park scenery which cannot be excelled. For the sake of variety, the road through Erpingham, shortening the distance a mile, may be taken on returning. The church, dedicated to St. Margaret, is a ruin, scarcely anything but the tower remaining. It stands on the north side of the whole, and is almost concealed by the lofty hollies which surround it. Drive to Beckham. Returning either through Susted and Medan. No person of taste will willingly leave Cromer without having visited the beautiful ruins of Beckham Church, which are the most picturesque of any in the neighbourhood. Having proceeded 4 miles on the Holt Road, we turned to the left, and at the distance of a mile the ruins present themselves, standing in a vale, where the waving of the corn, the song of the birds, or the sighing of the trees alone disturb their loneliness and silence. The walls of the middle aisle and the chancel are remaining, as is also the south porch, which is luxuriantly bound with ivy. We ourselves saw them to great advantage. It was evening, a shower of rain had just fallen, and the heavy clouds yet cast a dark shade upon them. The large drops fell occasionally from the boughs of the fine ash which extends itself over them, shielding them from the roughness of the east blast in this their day of the north blast, seeming in Fancy's eyes as if weeping for the decay of that which it protected, while the ivy, like a faithful friend, sheds its tears unseen in the bosom of one whom all had deserted. In a few moments, however, a brilliant rainbow threw its arch in the east, and the subdued rays of the setting sun burst forth, casting a bright gleam over them. There was beauty in the scene, there were reflections to be drawn from it, and an application to be made which could not be mistaken, and the ancient church of the valley, with all its accompaniments, spoke of a season of distress indeed, but of support and heavenly countenance, of cheerfulness and hope. The drive from hence to Gresham is very pleasing, and a fine view of the surrounding country is obtained from an elevated part of the road which leads to that place, which having reached, two roads offer themselves, one direct to Cromer through Stusted, and the other, which is a mile further round, through Medden and Felbrigg, making the whole extent of the drive about 12 miles, a consideration for which the beauty of the country will fully compensate. North Walsham. As North Walsham and Holt are both within a morning's drive from Cromer, a brief notice of each may not be unacceptable. The principal places lying on the road, or near it, have already been mentioned. North Walsham stands on an eminence with a declivity northward to the River Ant, and is distant 15 miles from Norwich, and 9 from Cromer, and is a pleasant and handsome, though irregularly built market town, consisting chiefly of 3 streets. It has a neat cross, built by Bishop Thirlby, in the reign of Edward VI and repaired in 1600 by Bishop Redman, whose arms, with those of the see, are impaled upon it. The River Ant, which passes within a mile north of the town, is navigable to Yarmouth. North Walsham suffered considerably in 1381, when a body of 50,000 insurgents, who had taken up arms in opposition to the odious poll tax, levied by Richard Roman II headed by John Leicester, a dyer of Norwich, were put to the rout by Bishop Spencer. They afterwards retreated to the town, where they were totally overthrown by the troops of the prelate, after the destruction of the church and other buildings, into which they had thrown themselves for security. On the Norwich road, about a mile south of the town, is a cross, erected on the heath, in commemoration of this victory. In 1600 it was nearly destroyed by an accidental fire. The church, dedicated to St. Nicholas, was rebuilt soon after its destruction in the rebellion of 1381, and is a noble structure. It is about 156 feet long and 68 broad, having a nave, chancel, and side aisles, with a fine south porch of flint and stone, adorned with boldly sculptured ornaments, amongst which are the arms of John of Gaunt and the Abbot of St. Bennet at the home. The aisles are separated from the body by a range of elegantly formed arches, supported by light clustered columns. A great part of the massive tower of this church, which was originally 147 feet high, fell down on the 16th of May, 1724. Another large portion fell on April 26, 1835. When the remaining fragments, being in a very dangerous state, were removed about 4 years ago. The great east window, in which were the arms of the see, with those of Bishop Freak, in painted glass, was unfortunately destroyed by a storm, in 1809. On the north side of the chancel is a fine tomb, with the effigy of Sir W.M. Haston, knight, who, as was not infrequently done in those times, in 1607, agreed with John Key, of London, to erect and fit up his tomb, with his effigy in armour, 5 feet and a half long, for which he was to be paid £200. Sir William died the following year. Instances, however, are recorded of persons having seen their own effigy, etc., carried away by the sacrilegious soldiers of Cromwell. This monument was partially cleaned and repaired a few years ago, but the workman being limited to £20, he cleaned only the upper part of the figure, leaving the rest untouched. The font, which is surrounded by an elegant octagonal railing, attracts much and deserved attention. The cover, which is profusely ornamented, is esteemed one of the richest of the kind in the kingdom. The benefice is a vicarage, of which the Bishop of Norwich is the patron. It has a grammar school, founded by Sir William Paston, in which several eminent men received their education, amongst whom were the great Lord Nelson Watson, the author of
Anglia Sacra,
Sir W.M. Hoste, and Archbishop Tennyson. The principal inn is the King's Arms. Holt is a remarkably clean and neat town built on a rising ground, with a market on Saturdays. It is 24 miles from Norwich and 10 from Cromer. The air of Holt is reckoned particularly salubrious, and its situation very agreeable. It has much increased of late in population, and several excellent houses have been built in or near it. In the year 1708 it suffered greatly from an accidental fire, which destroyed great part of it. A fine spring issues out of a gravel hill on Sprout Common, on the southwest side of the town, which affords an ample supply to the place of pure soft water. The spring head is securely walled round, and is visited by many, not only as a natural curiosity, but also for the purpose of enjoying the fine prospect which it commands over the picturesque valley of the Glaven, on the west side of the common, to which the spring gives name. The rectory house is very pleasantly situated near this spot, commanding a delightful view of the Letherinset and Bayfield woods. The race ground was broken up at the enclosure in 1809. Assemblies are still held occasionally at the Shire Hall. The church dedicated to St. Andrew is an ancient structure with a square tower, but has no spire. It contains monuments and inscriptions to the memory of the Holmes, Hobart, Butler, and Briggs families, with several others. The living is in the gift of St. John's College, Cambridge. The grammar school was founded by Sir John Gresham, Alderman of London, a native of this place. The Fishmongers' Company of London are governors of the school. The principal inn is the Feathers. We now take our leave, not that we have exhausted our subject, but because our limits forbid us to add more. Farewell, then, Cromer. Farewell, magnificent billows. Ye lofty cliffs, ye swelling hills, ye verdant woods, and ye pure and invigorating breezes. Dear are you all, for the impress of him who made you is stamped upon you, and a grateful recollection will hallow your remembrance. Prosperity be upon you and on your inhabitants. Long may the invalid continue to recover health from your waters, the weary in spirit to regain vigor, the mourner to receive alleviation to the sorrow which passes show, the youthful and happy to appreciate and enjoy your beauties. May all success be yours in all truth, and to its utmost extent farewell. The End. I hope you enjoyed reading the book A Guide to Cromer and Its Neighbourhood with me. If you liked this, please remember to like and subscribe. Please visit at Adonomy if you want to see different types of videos we produce. For statistics on our videos, visit at Adonomy Core. Visit our story reading channel website at https://adonomy.com/adonomaproject/adonomastories/. Happy YouTube travels!